Today we're going to talk about 10 tips and ideas to train your confidence and self-esteem. Welcome to One Good Life. In this channel, we draw insights from modern science and ancient wisdom that can help us live a happier and more meaningful life. Confidence opens doors. It creates a sense of positive leadership, and it also makes it more likely that people will hand more responsibility to us. It could be in the form of more public speaking opportunities, more positions of power and responsibility. And ultimately, we all like being surrounded by people who have the courage to take up responsibility in stressful situations where there's uncertainty. Often we just draw to the back and we just expect someone else to handle it, but instead if we take those as opportunities to train and to practice this skill, that can slowly help us get there. Improving our self-esteem also makes it less likely that we would tolerate or stay in positions of power imbalance or situations of abuse. But also confidence makes us more persuasive. If we want to be a force of good in the world, whatever that means for us, we need to learn to influence people in a positive way, and confidence definitely is a tool in that respect. Tip number 1, use your body to signal what you want. Many animals who share some of our same neurochemistry, when they lose a fight, they experience a chemical imbalance in their brain, which makes them more likely to lose the next fight than statistically you would predict from just observing their past behavior and their past competitions. Some of these you should apply to your everyday life. When you sit up in a meeting, when you walk on the street, it doesn't only signal other people that you're ready to take the responsibility that is handed to you, but it also makes you feel more confident as well. So definitely try it out. Some people have different hacks for this. So before they give a presentation, they might use a power pose, like a Superman or Superwoman type of pose that actually helps them center themselves and be ready for the challenge. Other people draw these from exercise that makes them feel more capable and energized as well. You can also consider the way you present yourself to others in the way you speak and the way you dress, for example, such as having a minimalist wardrobe that represents who you are as a person and who you want to be. Just like the phrase that I've heard a few times, where people suggest that you dress for the role that you want, not the role that you have now. Tip number 2, do good things for others. When we, for instance, volunteer, or we smile to someone, or we help someone at work, we help someone more junior or more senior, it adds a reason, a real valid reason why we can add value to others around us in a concrete, truthful way. I'm not a fan of saying things to yourself that you know are not true, telling lies to yourself. You probably won't believe it anyway. So you'll see that in these tips, I'm very much in favor of taking small steps, but actually accompany those by truthful statements and truthful assertions. Tip number 3, practice doing challenging things. If you think about it, when we cross the street, we are more likely to be hit by a car, for instance, or put ourselves in a dangerous situation than when we speak in front of a crowd. Yet, we often are more afraid of the second. The reason for that is that we've practiced the first one so many times that it's now second nature. So in the same way, every time an opportunity arises for us to do something that we are a little unease with and a little fearful of, let's take that fear and channel it in a positive way. This could mean taking that public speaking opportunity that you're dreading, or volunteering at work to host a meeting, or even volunteering to take that hard and intimidating role when you're playing that board game. For me, speaking in front of this camera and starting this YouTube channel is definitely on this list for sure. However, it's best to start with small things. Think about what you would do differently if tomorrow you woke up more confident. Some people include simple things, such as asking strangers for instructions or advice, or practicing maintaining eye contact with people they know. So write them all down and start from the top. and go from easiest to hardest. Every time you take a step, the next one will seem a little less intimidating, and trust this process as well. See all of these things as skills that you can work towards, but definitely factor in the time it takes to remove that unease and to practice. The first times you do whatever things are on your list, you're probably not going to be good at that, and definitely include that in your planning and estimations. Tip number 4, ask for feedback. Oftentimes we are way harsher at ourselves than we would be if a friend of us asked us for honest feedback on themselves and how they can improve. People who lack self-confidence, in their heads they think that they're being realistic. They think, I don't want to tell myself that I'm the best in the world and I'm amazing at everything, because it's not true. And I definitely don't encourage people to think in those grandiose terms. I do encourage people to be realistic with their self-assessments, and oftentimes we are way more negative than we should be if we actually want to assess ourselves objectively. So asking others for advice and feedback can definitely help in this process. You could ask people about positive qualities in you that they admire or that make you an enjoyable person to be around. You could also do this with your managers or colleagues at work. For instance, you can start that conversation with your manager about where you're at, what feedback they have for you, and how to slowly take steps to get to the next stage, which could be a promotion or a pay rise, for instance. And encourage people to be honest in their feedback. So don't just go to people who you know will definitely give you all positive words, and surround yourself with people who want the best for you, and they want you to grow, and they want you to give you constructive feedback as well for you to improve in whatever you want to improve in. Tip number 5, use words to describe your accomplishments. Write them down in a notebook. Keep a notebook next to you when you're going through your day, through your work day, for instance, or some notes on your phone. Or even if you don't feel confident writing them down, definitely every day take some time to say them out loud, or at least think of them in your head, but using concrete words. Often this forces us to be more precise with our language, which can help analyze the situation and our progress better than if we just think about them casually. Also, using actual words can help us construct a memory of what we achieved, and it can help us slowly move our progress bar in a purposeful and meaningful way. Here you can write anything from something in the list of our previous tip that you tried and you had the courage to give it a go, even if it didn't go well. Or you can also write down every time someone says thank you, or compliments you've received, feedback you got from people that you requested. Some people have found that writing some sort of life story, keeping a diary, can help them find or create a sense of purpose that is really, really important in living a meaningful life. Tip number 6, balance the amount of time you spend doing hard and easy things. This really depends on where we are at and our current skill set. So, for instance, perhaps this week has been a pretty hard one at work. We've taken on pretty challenging projects that have tired us up mentally a lot. So maybe what we need this week is to actually spend a little more time of our evenings relaxing and doing things that we enjoy and that make us happy and give us energy. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we've been slacking a little bit too much in the last few weeks and months, and we feel like we need a challenge. So take on that new project, something that you know you won't find too easy and that you can break down into intermediate objectives to achieve one at a time. Me personally, I do a lot of coding in my day-to-day work, which I believe helps me train my sense of resilience, because you're constantly solving problems and you know that problems and bugs are inevitable, and you're constantly thinking of how to approach the next one. However, this means that I also make a conscious effort to do things which I think I'm good at. So this could mean playing a board game where you know that sometimes you win, or singing or dancing in front of a mirror, or anything that makes you feel a small sense of pride. And here it can be helpful to think back to times in our life that we've really enjoyed and what memories those times bring. One for me was times in the past where I went dancing with my friends a lot, and it brings back memories of energy and flow, being happy and positive. So I think, how can I bring some of those elements to my current life, or things that I enjoyed as a kid, for instance. This is a story for another time, but there's things that I used to do when I was a kid that signaled to me that perhaps starting a YouTube channel and putting myself more out there in front of the camera was the right thing for me. And I can tell you more about that in coming weeks. Tip number 7, remember that your skills can be trained. This is the difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. The idea is that you recognize the truth that pretty much any skill and any quality that you might admire in others can be trained and can be achieved with the right amount of effort. This is something I definitely notice in friends of mine who struggle with self-esteem. They are consistently overestimating the capabilities of other people around them and underestimating their own. And they also tend to speak in very absolute terms. They tend to say things like, I'm really bad at this, which in itself, the words used indicate that that person doesn't recognize that they're bad at this now, but they can get better if they want to, and if they put the right amount of effort into it to get there. And here, something else that comes to mind for me is when people talk about their skills in interviews or with their managers at work, oftentimes we describe how we assess our skills to be at right now, and we fail to highlight how good we are at learning new things, how willing we are to put the effort in to actually get better at something. Often your employers care more about your ability to acquire new information and adapt to your problem-solving strategy depending on what new information you receive, more than where you currently are at with certain tools or certain skills. So the key to not undersell yourself is to think of yourself as this person who is capable of doing ABC now and is also capable of learning DEF tomorrow. Tip number 8, analyze your thoughts. To me, this is key and fundamental. I use mindfulness meditation as a way of stopping and really listening to what's happening in my mind. Some days I can hear a lot of planning going on. Some days I hear a lot of looking back into the past. We're constantly lost in thought, and we're often not even aware that we are lost in thought. So meditation can really help see how hard it is to pay attention to something that we've set our intention to focus on, and that can be mind-boggling really, and kind of scary how, depending on what your thoughts are telling you, if you don't create some sense of separation and distance between yourself, your inner core, whatever that is, and that thought that just emerged in your mind, it's extremely difficult to not associate and directly link yourself to the thought. Some people like giving that inner critic a nickname, typically a funny one, so they can think like, oh, I got you. I recognize that you are telling me all these negative things, and I just wave you goodbye and let you go by. Self-compassion to me is striking the right balance between self-acceptance and self-improvement. There's papers in some of the most prestigious psychology journals that indicate that developing this practice of self-compassion can have a positive impact in combating depression, anxiety, and the harmful effects of stress as well. I recommend that you pay close attention to the language that you use when you describe your accomplishments and your path so far, and that you compare that with how people who you consider confident speak. In finding these role models, go for people who you think are true, good, positive leaders, not people who are controlling or dictatorial or who just want to tell people what to do. I believe personally that a good leader is someone who inspires you to be the best version of yourself, whatever that means to you personally. However, I have noticed that some confident people that I consider good leaders have a more nuanced approach to how they describe their journey and a more positive approach, not one that is unrealistic, but one that highlights potential and that highlights all the progress they've made so far. And that's the same way that they talk about other people's achievements and the same way that we should be talking about our own as well. Tip number 9, be more objective in your self-assessment. Someone once told me that inner voice cannot be that reliable if everyone has it. And if, for instance, maybe the Prime Minister of Canada has the inner voice that tells them you've achieved so much, but you're not the President of the United States. In this globalized world, it's always going to be easy to identify people who are better than us at things. Back in the day when we used to live in small towns, often people have very specific expertise in certain areas. There were very few people that knew how to work with leather, gold, metals, and it's easier to have a more obvious sense of self-worth if you're one of the few people in the community who others can come to for advice and help on a certain matter. Nowadays that's harder to do, but it's important to still try to stay objective. For the vast majority of us, there's always going to be people who are better and worse at anything we do. There are types of cognitive therapy that can help us work with someone who can recognize some of the assumptions that we are making in the way we think about ourselves and our journey. The systems in our brain that make us compare ourselves to others and assess our status are extremely old. We share them with lots of animals around the world, some of which we've separated in the evolution path long time ago. So I don't think we can ever realistically expect that we will be able to just stop doing this. However, we can challenge the way we think of ourselves in the context of our community and the wider world as well. Perhaps comparing ourselves against others when we were kids made a little more sense because we didn't know that many people and most others were in a very similar path to ours. However, as we grow older, the amount of possible paths and journeys and games that we can play are infinite, and we can also create our own based on our own passions, strengths, and unique skill set. So maybe it's time to challenge some of the criteria that we use to assess ourselves. Tip number 10, be kind to yourself. This can practically be implemented as developing a practice of saying positive things to yourself and also smiling to yourself in the mirror. I realized I've been doing this pretty much all my life. Often it's just a very subtle smile, but I believe that if we keep doing this day after day, it definitely accrues over time and it helps us create a sense of self-worth that is more robust than we might experience at first. Even Navy SEALs do it. However, it's recommended that you focus on positive assertions, not positive affirmations. The difference between these is that with positive assertions, what you're telling yourself is, I am willing, I am happy to put in the effort to make this work and to get better at something. You are not being untruthful. You're not telling yourself that you're amazing at all these things when currently you're not. But that's the key word, currently. And finally, tip number 11, I'll give you a bonus. Remember your inherent worth. What many religions and spiritual practices have shared in common over millennia is this concept of inherent worth in every human being. The idea that every person is godly, every person has some divine spark, which you can think as potential, as that path or purpose that's there for you to discover or invent for yourself. At the end of the day, for all we know, this is a fact. Nobody has ever lived or will ever live that is exactly the same as you. We have our own vulnerabilities, strengths, DNA, fingerprints. Let's keep that in mind always. So that's all for today. I really hope you enjoyed it and you learned some practical ideas for how to live a better and more meaningful life. Please like this video and comment down below with your thoughts. It can be positive or negative feedback, and please subscribe as well if you would like to stay in touch and get more practical ideas based on modern science and ancient wisdom for how to improve yourself and your life. See you next week.